Welcome to the Business Podcast, where we interview professionals across all industries. Hey, it's Simon. Welcome back. Today we have Brooke Herron, founder of Local Food and Drink Marketing and a longtime wine and spirit industry veteran. Brooke, it's great to have you here with us today. How are you?
I'm great, Simon. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So maybe you can kick us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and share something that most people would not know about you.
Okay, so a little bit about myself. If I'm sticking to the wine topic, I think that's already enough. I've been in the wine industry for 20 years now. So I started when I was 21, drove up to wine country, and ever since I've been in that industry. If there's something that most people don't know about me, probably I'm going to say two things. One, I'm a dual British and American citizen. Two, I run a hiking group, a meetup hiking group.
Made up like a virtual hiking group or an actual
meetup? No, no, an actual hiking group.
I heard
with real
up.
hikes outdoors.
Got it. So not playing on a video game console. Got it.
No.
Very cool. So tell us. I mean, you kind of gave us a glimpse right now. You turned 21. Very good age to go to wine country, and talk to us how you got your career start up until what you're doing now.
Yeah. So people at my age, my start is very unique because there was no one my age in the wine industry at that time. So almost no one, unless they were like the son of a winery owner or something, or the daughter. So way back then, 2001, wine was not popular in the United States, especially not with young people in their 20s, and not in their 30s either. Wine was really something that you saw people with a little bit of money on the East Coast that either had European family or who had traveled to Europe drank, but it was not in America or the United States, wine was not a major beverage, right? So no one in their 20s that I knew drank wine unless it was like Boone's Strawberry Hill or, like malt wine beverages. So when I moved up to Sonoma County, the reason I moved here is because I thought it was intriguing that it was a place built on an agricultural industry. And my boyfriend and I at the time had been looking for somewhere beautiful to move that had other things we liked. And we got started on the Sonoma County sort of trail by starting with the fact that it was near the ocean, and one of our favorite breweries, Lagunitas, was located in Sonoma County. So we kept going down the research trail and realized that this area has a lot of vineyards. It's really beautiful. And we decided, hey, let's move to Sonoma County. So we moved up here. My boyfriend got a job at a wine and liquor shop. I got a job working as an event server at wineries, pouring wine. And all I did to get that job was literally show up at a winery with my resume and hand them out for a day. And by the end of the day, I'd already gotten 2 calls, because it was very rare to find a young person that was motivated and that wanted to do this work professionally in wine country. It was mostly retirees working a couple days for fun or for a wine discount at that point in wine country.
Really interesting. So I'm sure you had a very unique perspective at your age, being exposed to people who were more senior to you.
Yep.
And you might have some interesting stories. So the first few years being there in Sonoma, what kind of interesting stories, realizations did you have that you could share?
I mean, honestly, my first few years were just the best years of my entire life, because I had grown up in a place that, not even just where I grew up, but I will say this is a US thing. This is an American thing. Our country was not a gourmand country, right? Until recently, over the past decade or so, this was not a country that was talking about filet mignon or French cheese, right? Or organic wine. We just weren't there yet. So people were more likely to be eating like meatloaf and mashed potatoes at home, right? People weren't eating sushi yet. Like, things were different. right? We've had a really fast evolution into a foodie country over the past 10 to 15 years. But 20 years ago, we were not there yet, especially not if you were young and if you were not from a rich family. So I was used to eating pretty, basic food. And I was suddenly, catapulted into a world of fine dining and wine. And my first job was at Simi Winery as an event server. I would pour wine for all their events and I'd get paid $15 an hour and I'd get given a bottle of wine at the end of every shift to take home. I thought I was in heaven. I mean, I was drinking amazing wine that to me was really expensive. I was hanging out with chefs, and after every shift, I would eat, like a 3 or 4 course meal, the same meal that I had just served to these, wealthy people at this winery. So I was learning every day about food, about wine, about food and wine pairing. But I was also seeing a very different world than I had ever even known existed. And I was working with mostly people that were 30 to 40 years my senior at that point, maybe even more. But I did find a few people closer to my age in the event serving world, in the hospitality world. They typically tended to be people who had grown up in the area and had not gone away to college, or they tended to be, retired people or people in their 50s or 60s, kind of doing a little side work. So I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying that I learned a lot about food and wine. Just that's what I learned. I also learned how beautiful this county is. I hiked everywhere. I visited the ocean. Really life felt like a dream for the first couple of years here. I mean, I wasn't rich, but for me, I was making quite good money for how fun the work was that I was doing. And I was learning so much every day. So I took it on myself to learn even more by becoming friends with the chef of the winery and, getting him to sit down with me in private sessions and talk to me about bitter and sweet and salt, right? And why certain wines pair. I asked hospitality companies to give me extra work. So I was like running around Sonoma County working for like 3 different on-call hospitality companies. I was doing showing up one night at Kendall Jackson during a sparring or fencing event. And then the next day I would go serve champagne at a winemaker's house for like a dinner for his winemaker friends. And then I would go back to my main gig, serving wine at Simi Winery and their partner winery, Ravenswood Winery. And the whole time I'm drinking new wines every day. I'm taking wines home. And then I enrolled in classes in the local community college on California wine, food and wine pairing, etc.
I'm getting excited just hearing about all this. So if we just take a bit of a slice out of what you're saying, what were some unique insights that you gathered when it comes to wine pairing that you could share?
On it, now that it's been so many years since that time, I actually don't geek out about this stuff as much anymore because I guess I just know enough that I don't need to. But I think I remember at the time, it wasn't so much the broad stuff, right? Like salty, sweet, that's all pretty, I have a very good palate. So I'm going to know pretty quickly, even when I didn't know anything, like from a book sense, from a book learning sense, I knew with my palate whether something paired or not. I just couldn't describe why. Right? I've always had a very good palate. So the biggest things that stood out to me were those like insane aha moments where you're like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. And a couple of them still stick out to me, which is one night I was at a dinner and the chef made an espresso chocolate torte cake and we served Madeira. And the combination was so mind-blowing that I put Madeira on my list of places I had to visit before I die. And it's been on my list ever since, all because that night when I tasted at the end of my shift, this insane chocolate espresso torte and this glass of 50-year-old, Madeira that had been like sifted through a piece of silk by the sommelier. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so good. Like there's nothing that's ever been better in my mouth. And so I think it's those moments. It wasn't so much the broad stuff, the boring stuff. It was just being like blown away at, the talent of a chef who can pair things like that, who knows exactly what he's doing, but also just the beauty and the fun and hedonistic pleasure that there is in this industry, that I've now kind of lost touch with that side of things. But when you're new and you're young and everything is new, that's when you got to soak it up for everything that it's worth.
Maybe one of the outcomes of this entire meeting today is to reinvigorate going to Madeira, since
oh my God,
we haven't
yes.
visited. Okay.
Just last week, I was like, wait a minute, I haven't gone to Madeira yet. I got to get there.
Awesome. So what are some of your favorite pairings?
That's such a broad question. I don't want to say specific things, but I'll use some general rules. I have a very particular palate now. I've been in this industry a very long time, and I've worked with so many different wineries, including a lot of importers and different countries. So I've also lived in Europe for 4 years. I've traveled extensively to Italy and France. I've worked for French importers, Italian importers. So my palate is very strongly unique to me at this point, which does not mean that that's what everyone else should agree with, right? It's just my palate. But my palate leans towards certain types of wines. And so I'm almost always going to drink the kinds of wines that I like best now, because I've spent 20 years honing, my preferences down. So what I love best in the world, if I have to choose any wines, are red wines from the Piemonte region in Italy, white wines from the Loire region in France, specifically Vouvray Sec, which is Chenin Blanc, and Touraine and Sancerre, which are Sauvignon Blancs. And then I love champagne, grower producer champagne, slightly aged. And those are and Côte Rôtie is probably in that range, as is Burgundy. So some of the most expensive wines in the world. except for the Loire whites. So if I have to choose food and wine pairings that blow my mind, I absolutely love Asian food paired with Loire whites. I could also go with a Gruner Veltliner, but I'm usually going to drink a Loire or a champagne over anything else because I love those wines. So I'm sometimes going to kind of shove my wines into the food that I'm eating because I love those wines best, and I'm going to just try to make that pairing work, and it usually does. I also absolutely love, Italian food or things that are sort of simple fare, paired with the high acid reds of Piemonte, which are Nebbiolo based, primarily. But you've also got Barbera there, you've got Dolcetto, and you've got some whites like Arnaz as well. If I'm going to drink a Nebbiolo, I love simple food, like a caprese salad or, gosh, I can't think of anything else specific right now. Maybe a charcuterie platter, but everything I eat when I go to Piemonte pairs perfectly with Nebbiolo. And it's actually a pretty meat and cheese heavy region. So if that gives you any indication. If you had to look at all the wines that I love best, you will understand my palate, which kind of extends to food. Almost all those wines that I mentioned are higher acid wines. They're more refreshing. They're not heavy. They're not laden with very robust or, tannins. So I'm not your Cabernet drinker. I'm not drinking Cabernet. I'm drinking Nebbiolo, Nero d'Avola, Nerello Mascalese, Frappato, for reds and Burgundies and Côte Rôties. So that also kind of extends to my food tastes, which are, rather than a super big steak with cheese slathered all over it, I'd rather have a caprese salad or like a filet mignon carpaccio, and those food tastes go really well with my wine tastes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Some might say people's food taste and wine taste, beverage taste, say a lot about their personality, and in a good way.
Well, I do like really spicy food, so that would be accurate in that sense.
Oh, there you go. When you think about the work that you're doing now, what are some interesting points of feedback that you get from clients from the work that you do? Maybe you can share a story or two.
Well, I think you have to give some context to the work that I do now, since we only talked about my background in hospitality, which is a long time ago. What I do now is very specific. So I spent a lot of years in sales management. I spent a lot of years in, marketing and hospitality management at wineries. But for the past 5 to 6 years, I've been doing 100% digital strategy. So focusing specifically on digital marketing strategy and on online sales strategy. So I'm on a very different side of the industry now. I'm working with only online things, right? So I'm looking at a business and I'm considering all online channels, and I'm highlighting opportunities that have been missed or highlighting opportunities and areas where they can improve. And all of the things that I work with now are directly correlated to return on investment. So, I'm not doing social media. I'm not doing, posting images. I'm doing things that such as email marketing strategy, which correlate directly to per campaign's, sales totals and increased sales over time, right? I'm doing lead generation campaigns. I'm doing paid media and PPC campaigns to drive sales and conversions. I'm doing user experience and UX kind of audits to, kind of help businesses make their websites more user friendly from a sales and marketing perspective. So kind of taking all of that into consideration, I work with a lot of very different types of small businesses, but I'm doing somewhat similar activities, but how I do them and what I do varies greatly based on the business. So, I have a client who's an Italian wine importer. They import wine from one specific winery in Italy, and they import it so that they can run a wine club and an online shop for that one Italian brand. And for that specific client, what I helped them with was to start doing, any better email marketing strategy. Previous to my working with them, they sent a few emails per year. They collected whatever sales they got with those emails, and then they relied on the rest for the rest of the year on the sales that they would get from people who walked into that winery in Sicily and placed an order on the tablet that they had put in that tasting room at that winery. Now, when COVID hit, all of those sales disappeared. And now they were left with only the ability to market online, but with zero experience marketing online. So that's when they found me through a mutual contact, and I helped them basically figure out and implement a better email marketing strategy. And I did that by showing them how to create campaigns and offers that are more compelling. I had to teach them how landing pages work and why you have to create unique optimized landing pages for every campaign versus just sending people to a regular page on your website or to a regular product page. And those changes alone, just with implementing better email marketing strategy, sending more campaigns, sending more targeted campaigns, and leading people to better pages, tripled their sales within just the first couple of months of my working with them. And then I was able to work with them for another few months to teach them as much as I could about how my thought process works and why I made the decisions that I made. And now they run things pretty much on their own, but they still call me every month for a few hours of strategy and to kind of just go over some campaigns that they're putting together because they don't have my experience in marketing. So they can't, I can't really teach somebody 20 years of experience in a couple hours. So for them, their comments are always just, hey, you're way better at this than we are. We're glad we found you. And, I was able to help them recover almost all of the sales they lost due to COVID. And that's amazing when you think about the fact that previous to my working with them, they were making almost all of their sales were new sales. They were new sales to new customers, and they were sales to existing wine club members. But from the point that I started working with them, they didn't have any more new customers. So all the sales I made for the next 16 months for them were all to existing customers on the same email list. And somehow I was able to still make 90% of the sales they used to make with thousands of new customers coming into a winery every month. And I was able to make almost the same amount of sales just selling to the same list of 1,000 people, of which only 30% open email campaigns. That's the power of good digital or email marketing strategy.
Could you talk about how your knowledge of the wine industry applies to the marketing strategies that you
Oh,
use?
yeah. Yeah, very important topic and good question. Thank you. Yeah, if I could not do what I do if I didn't have the history that I have in the wine industry. So, yes, if I was a great marketer that just really knew email marketing, I might be able to make some improvements, but nowhere near what I can do with the subject matter knowledge that I have and the specific industry knowledge that I have, right? This applies to everything. This applies to SEO, to email marketing, to content marketing. When you truly intimately understand the industry and the niche that you're in, and you understand how to talk about the products or the services in a dozen different ways, and you've addressed many different kinds of audiences, from wholesale customers to sommeliers to masters of wine to regular consumers to PR agencies, to ad agencies, right? You really have a handle on how to do anything you need to do at any given moment without having to learn how to do it, right? Or how to talk about it. So a lot of what I do right now, I am able to be immediately successful at a higher degree because of that, all of those years of experience, not just drinking and tasting wine and knowing about wine. That's great, especially from a content creation perspective. I definitely also leverage that in my SEO content strategy. I would not be as great at SEO as I am if I didn't have such a deep subject matter knowledge. But even when it comes to my sales and marketing management experience at wineries or on the wholesale side, every single experience I've had has given me something really valuable that now helps me in my digital marketing work. Whether that is understanding how to make a sale, which translate into writing a better ad that's going to have higher conversions, right? Or whether that's the fact that I had to basically figure stuff out at such a young age for a lot of years at very low budget wineries that gave me no money, but expected me to do magic things. So I had to figure out how to succeed with very few resources for a lot of my career. And that has served me extremely well on the marketing side. When you have to figure out how to get the most you can possibly get, or the best results you can get with a very small budget, you basically learn to be very efficient and very creative. So I know how to seek out any opportunity that exists to get business or to target a better audience. And that skill set has sort of spread and applied to everything I do. And I like to say I'm an optimizer above everything. I seek out opportunities to optimize, and no matter what that is, whether that's optimize for getting a larger number of potential customers to my website, whether that's optimizing a specific campaign to drive more conversions, whether that's optimizing the content and my contact list to get better PR for a brand. All of it has come in handy now, even in the digital marketing side.
I appreciate that answer. And it definitely makes sense how the intimate knowledge of an industry makes you really understand the consumer or the end buyer and how to speak to them, what to say to them so that they react. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I'm a little excited about marketing, if you couldn't tell.
Totally. You talked about conversions, and maybe you have insights on how to optimize there. Now, how do you optimize for conversions?
Well, I mean, all of this depends on what channel you're on, right? And what you're doing. So this could be optimizing for conversions. It can be there's a lot of different areas that you can optimize for conversions. It could be user experience, optimizing your website to drive more sales conversions. It could be email marketing, right? Optimizing your campaigns or your offers to drive, and your landing pages to drive more conversions. It could be implementing segmentation and automations in email marketing that are going to drive more conversions. But if you have to kind of pull a common thread, on how you optimize for conversions, regardless of what platform or channel you're using, it really drills down to being as specific as possible and not overlooking anything that seems small, and also not underestimating the amount of work that goes into any campaign that you run on any channel. The biggest failing that I see at a lot of small wineries and mid-sized wineries and businesses in general is that they really want to believe that things are simpler than they are because they want to believe that they're easier because if they're easier, they think they can do something and it's going to have these great results and they don't have to put a lot of effort in. That's just not the case. And there is no other way around this. You have to do the work. So I'll use one specific example, which is, let's say you have a PPC ad campaign. A lot of businesses and a lot of marketers place all the emphasis on the ad, right? The ad copy, the ad image, the ad headline, the bid strategy. All of the responsibility for the success of that ad is placed on the ad itself. When in reality, half or more than half of the responsibility for whether that campaign is a success has nothing to do with that ad itself. It has to do with the page you send people to from that ad, right? What does that page look like? Does it make it easy for people to take the action you want them to take? Are you presenting the information you need to present in an easy to understand way? Now, if you collect their information on that page, have you created and optimized email campaigns that are going to bounce and be automatically sent to those people you've collected on that page? There's so many steps involved in optimizing for conversions, no matter what kind of campaign you're running. And what I find a lot of people do is they ignore a lot of those steps, right? So they just focus on the ad, but they don't worry about building a landing page. They just send them to a regular page on their website and hope for the best. Or, maybe they send them to a great page, but they collect their email address, but then they have no automation set up, or they have an automation that's really lame or written automatically by a system and it isn't automated and it's not speaking to that audience in the right way.
Speaking to the audience in the right way, and that seems to be key, especially because a lot of companies are forced to be digital that weren't, and then the companies that are digital now have that added competitive element with more players in the digital space,
Yeah.
competing more aggressively. So how do you help address that with your clients, or are there other elements or challenges that they face where that might not be as important of a factor to consider?
Generally, there are so many other bigger issues with wine businesses and wineries that have to be tackled before we could even start talking about the voice of the content. I'm generally working there, and their content honestly sometimes isn't really where they need the most help, right? Like some of their content, it's pretty good, but what really, I start earlier in the process, right? So usually I'm not there telling them how to word their email, right? I'm more there, teaching them how to look at email marketing, right? Or whatever that channel is and how to use it better and how to optimize that channel, right? So part of that sometimes extends to, sort of showing them what kind of mix of content makes sense so that they're not sort of badgering their list with overly salesy or pushy content. That can kind of relate to using the right voice. I do have to have conversations a lot with businesses that are on one side of the spectrum, to one side of the extreme or the other, that either send far too few emails or communication, or that send far too many. Those that send far too many are usually typically sending all sales, buy, discount, ship now. And so the conversations that I have with those businesses that are over marketing or communicating 100% in a sales way, right? Where they're always asking for something. I try to communicate to them that you get much better engagement over the long term, which correlates to increased sales and profits, as well as increased customer retention and wine club retention when you mix up the content and you communicate with people sometimes in a way where you're not running a sale. You're not asking for a sale, right? You might be sharing notes from the vineyard. You might be sharing a food and wine pairing tip. You might be, sharing a blog post, right, about the appellation that you're in, or a blog post about something fun that's related to your winery's history or region. Maybe you wrote a blog post about the grapes that are native to the region that your winery is located in. There's a lot of different examples. Maybe it's a video, maybe it's, a winemaker tasting on Zoom. So in a nutshell, when it comes to communication, I'm not typically one there telling them how to word an email. I'm usually dealing at a bit higher level where I'm teaching them how to think about the type of communication that they're pushing out and asking them to be more cognizant of how that messaging appears from a customer's perspective, right? And asking them to communicate more often in a non-sales or non-aggressive way in order to build better relationships with their customers. Something really important to note, though, and this is what I have these conversations with wineries every day, is that even when you're sending communication that is not a sale and that's not actually asking for a sale, it actually still can drive sales if you do your job right. And that's more connected to content marketing. But I think that's too long of an answer for that.
I think that's a perfect answer. So thanks for sharing it. And it's been fun speaking to you so far. If we switch gears for a little bit and you had the opportunity to go back in time and meet anyone in history, spend an afternoon with them, who would it be and what would you do?
I'm not going to say anybody famous because I can't think of anybody, but I think for me, it would be, I would like to meet the family member of mine who I don't know, and I don't know their name, that lived in Albania before my grandfather's family emigrated to Italy, because we have no idea who they are. And we haven't been able to track them down, but we just found out about 10 years ago that we're part Albanian. And I would love to meet the matriarch or the patriarch of that family that's in my family that lived in Albania before they immigrated.
Awesome. So you might take a trip to Albania.
Oh, I'm definitely going to.
There you go. And Madeira.
Yeah. I did spend 4 years in Europe, but it wasn't enough.
I gotcha. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and I'm looking forward to again. But until next time, maybe you can share a parting thought.
Parting thought, this is something I have learned over the past 6 years of changing my niche and changing my profession and what I do for a living, which has not been easy. And one thing I have learned, and it hits home and it never stops being as true, is that if there's something you really want to do, no matter how hard it is, just remember that if you start taking action today, even in the tiniest of ways, for me, it was starting a blog and writing a post a month, right? Or reading digital marketing tutorials, right? And then offering some pro bono work. Whatever it is, start today, even if it's super tiny, and just never stop. If you do not stop, you will definitely get where you want to be. Consistency is the key to everything.
That's perfect. Well, Brooke, until next time, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for attending the Business Podcast, and stay tuned for more episodes.